Brother, if you want your son high-level wrestling, send him 2-3 years Dagestan and forget. 6 months, one time you can call him.
Before you pack your bags to move to Dagestan, you have to watch this video. Only 13% of MMA fighters seek medical care after concussive symptoms. Found that 100% of knockouts involve direct head impact. Cognitive testing reveals slower processing speed, verbal memory impairment, and decline in psychomotor function. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Delilah and I do the research so you don't have to. Researchers from the University of Toronto and St. Michael's Hospital in Canada published a large systematic review examining traumatic brain injuries in mixed martial arts. After reviewing nearly 3 decades of medical and fight data, they found something deeply concerning. MMA fighters suffer frequent head trauma. They rarely seek medical attention and often return to training within days, sometimes within 24 hours after being knocked unconscious. These findings echo concerns raised for years by major medical organizations. The American Medical Association, Canadian Medical Association, British Medical Association, and Australian Medical Association have all publicly described MMA as dangerous and in some cases have called for an outright ban. And this concern is not exaggerated. In most team sports like soccer or basketball, injury rates range from 5 to 15 injuries per 1,000 athletic exposures. In American football, it raises to about 8 injuries per 1,000 exposures. But in combat sports, injury rates range from 85 to over 220 injuries per 1,000 exposures, among the highest in all athletics. Today, we're going to examine why MMA stands out and what science says about the impact on the brain. So if medical organizations are calling this dangerous, the next question is obvious. What exactly is MMA and how did it become so powerful so quickly? Mixed martial arts, or MMA, is a full contact combat sport that combines techniques from boxing, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, Judo, karate, and kickboxing. Modern MMA emerged in the early 1990s, initially marketed as a way to determine the most effective fighting style. What began as a fringe spectacle quickly became a global industry. The largest organization, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, the UFC, was purchased in 2001 for just $2 million. By 2017, it was sold for over $4 billion. Today, MMA generates billions in revenue, driven by pay-per-view events, sponsorships, gambling, and global media rights. Fighters like Conor McGregor, Jon Jones, Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre, and Khabib Nurmagomedov have become international stars. MMA is now one of the fastest growing sports in the world, especially among young adults aged 18 to 35, same age range most vulnerable to repetitive brain injury during neurological development and peak cognitive function. But while the business has matured rapidly, the medical understanding of its long-term consequences has not. Understanding the business and popularity of MMA is important, but to understand the risk, we need to look at how fights actually end. To understand why MMA is neurologically dangerous, we need to understand knockouts. A knockout occurs when a fighter is rendered unconscious or severely disoriented due to a blow to the head. Medically, a knockout meets the criteria for concussion or traumatic brain injury. There is another type of knockouts, which is called technical knockouts. That happens when the referee stops the fight because a fighter can no longer intelligently defend themselves, often due to repeated head strikes. In MMA, this usually occurs during ground and pound, when one fighter spins another and delivers continuous blows to the head. Video analysis conducted between 2006 and 2012 by researchers at St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto found that 100% of knockouts involved direct head impact. Fighters often received multiple additional head strikes after losing consciousness. In technical knockout situations, fighters absorbed an average of 18 head strikes in the final 30 seconds before stoppage. This means brain trauma often continues after the brain is already injured. Once you understand what a knockout really is from a medical perspective, the injury statistics start to make a lot more sense. Epidemiological studies found that 58% to 78% of all MMA injuries involve the head or the face, and between 28% to 46% of professional MMA fights end in knockouts or technical knockouts. For comparison, Knockout-related fight stoppages are significantly lower in wrestling and judo, and even in boxing, and MMA shows higher rates of repetitive head trauma. And some studies estimate that fighters experience an average of 6 or more knockouts or technical knockouts over a career. From a neurological standpoint, this represents repetitive traumatic brain injury, not isolated accident. And what's more alarming is that MMA fighters suffering head trauma fall between the ages of 18 to 35 years old, with some continuing into their 40s. This is a critical period for executive function, memory, and emotional regulation, and long-term neurological health. And fighters who suffer one knockout are significantly more likely to suffer another. Risk increases with age, heavier weight classes, and longer fight careers. Suggested cumulative vulnerability of the brain. MRI studies conducted by neurology research teams in the US and Europe show reduced volume in the thalamus and caudate nucleus of MMA fighters. Probably saying that wrong. These regions are essential for cognition, motor control, and information processing. Fighters also show white matter damage, indicating disrupted neural communication. Cognitive testing reveals slower processing speed, verbal memory impairment, and decline in psychomotor function, even in fighters without diagnosed concussions. Structural changes in the brain are concerning on their own, but what matters most is whether they affect how the brain actually works. Chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, is linked to repetitive head trauma. While CTE is well documented in boxing and American football, research on MMA and CTE is still in its infancy. MMA is only a few decades old, meaning many fighters have not yet reached the age where neurodegenerative diseases fully manifest. And researchers repeatedly warn that the absence of long-term data does not mean absence of risk. And despite these risks, the way head injuries are handled in MMA is surprisingly minimal. Which brings us to the core issue. Not whether MMA is entertaining, but whether the long-term cost is being ignored here. Surveys show that only 13% of MMA fighters seek medical care after concussive symptoms. More than half return to training within 48 hours, some within 24 hours. From a medical perspective, this dramatically increases the risk of long-term neurological damage. Today, MMA is still a billion-dollar industry, but the science suggests the brain is paying the price. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a like and write your opinion down below in the comments.